This is a narrative, short narrative on a generic, complicated issue which has been around for a very long time. And so I've given the question in a way of introducing a lot of topics here because it is extremely important to both sides of the fence, and with the idea of just answering the question, I will begin to enunciate what I believe should be very clear. And maybe there is something in terms of an indifference at this point, but for years and years, it has been a very, very prominent issue on the so-called tobacco wars front. So, go ahead.
In the press coverage of tobacco wars, in processing the testimonial, the term safer cigarette always comes up. Often, this is attributed to facts. Tell me all you know about this. And also, I'm curious to know, I think everybody is curious to know, is there such a name as safer cigarettes?
Let me try to figure out, because I gave you a general attribution here of safer cigarettes, and you said something about facts.
Mm-hmm.
Read that again, please. You're saying
often the term safer cigarette is attributed to facts.
Okay, let me take that part.
I want you to tell me what you know about it.
No, I can't tell you what I know about it other than a very simple yes or no, and true or false. Do you see where I'm going? I can't go beyond what I know. So if the question were put in another way.
So in the tobacco wars, there always appeared a term safer cigarette. Mm. Is there such thing as safer cigarette?
Simply, and that answer is no.
Why did they call it safer cigarette?
Well, it was never a principle of the tobacco companies, and having read or been exposed to over 1 million documents and in the room with approximately 50, 60, or maybe 100 to 200 people at one time, with various knowledge being shared and a taxonomy of the way things were going to be cut up. It's an unpleasant thought, but the reality of the concept of safer cigarette, and some of you may actually out there in La La Land actually have come to the conclusion that this is true. There is no real concept of, or no real, an actual thing called a safer cigarette. Now, in the quest for finding a safer cigarette, this is almost like looking for the Holy Grail. If you were, and you had been employed at any tobacco company, which most often hired within its own within its own area. The idea would be we have these things, we make this thing in a certain way, and it's made in different ways. It has different formulas. But to make a proclamation that there is a safer cigarette, no, after 4.25 years and then years and years of looking it up, there may be one document somewhere along the line, but there are two things that I can assure you that I never came in contact with in the time that I have actually been involved. One is a reference to John F. Kennedy, other than 1962, when he authorized the first Surgeon General's report. Nothing beyond that. And I don't recall anyone else having had any kind of document, which may well have existed, because he was very careful when he authorized the first Surgeon General's report, which is Luther Cherry, I believe, and I've read it, which I don't think many people have actually, but not only read it, but concentrated on it because of the special account interest and the fact that Brown and Williamson was a member of that 1964 commission, and the fact that a lot of the information that could have been put into that didn't happen. So again, back to the two things that I never saw. One, with the exception of the reference to the documentation of John F. Kennedy's authorization to Luther Cherry to look into tobacco and form a Surgeon General's opinion. I saw nothing else related to John F. Kennedy, and the omission may have been harmless error or just harmless. The second thing that was not found but was part of a mission is something called Safer Cigarette, and that within the perimeter of tobacco research is not only a deafening blow if you come into the concept of a safer cigarette. Let's just say there were attempts to present for many years in the 60s some kind of modification, but it would never be for the purpose of a safer cigarette, and something that would be a smoking gun, so to speak. And I am told that there existed, perhaps was a particular way of dealing with certain things that happen, and particularly in chemical research and so forth. But it never made it to paper. So if I were to say, I know something about a safer cigarette, I would really have to be lying, because I don't. Other than some peripheral things that people could interpret. Now, this may lead into a defensive statute for posture for the tobacco industry, and maybe they have one along these lines. There was something that was heard of, told about, called a gentleman's agreement, and maybe Richard Daynard has that copy, or Stanton Glantz has come across it in the goals of accumulating a lot of document dumping in the legacy library. Some of it is not really dumping. It has some legendary characteristics. But to put it very plainly, the answer is no. And the millions of documents that I was exposed to, and this is a long time, but certainly this question was always there. Would you be able to find a safer cigarette, or someone who said, I've got a safer cigarette formula, here it is? Nothing but a nut would be able to present this. Because in the theory, if you take safer cigarettes, and I'm sure all you great litigators out there who have taken tobacco on, Wendell, I forget his name, from Florida, and so, the people who have had something to do with tobacco, if there is a question here, it's not that question, because you don't have the answer. And as far as an answer, I just simply cannot say no. If someone testified to that and said they were involved in a safer cigarette, my answer would be they were lying. There's no such thing. And that principally is the point. I mean, you have a very dangerous product. Essentially, dangerous in any way that you have it, especially now that you have something called the e-cigarette. I mean, just think of how much pneumonia you're going to have and how the variation is going to be. That doesn't really prove safe. As a matter of fact, it's very, very detrimental. You have something else that...
Yes.
The veracity of the point. I mean, if you're looking for truth here, is that anyone who says this and relies upon it is probably referring to fire-safe cigarettes. And yes, there is a probable nature to fire-safe cigarettes, because there is a possibility. I could make one right here. I could make a fire-safe cigarette, but then again, you just don't have holes in it. But why do it? I mean, it defeats the purpose.
And what about the internal compartmentalized documents? What is true and false?
You mean in terms of the safer cigarettes?
Yes.
Well, I hope that
encompasses... What's true and what is false about this?
Encompassing the entire period of time that I was there and everything that I saw, there were two areas. Two things that I never saw. One was a document having to do with John F. Kennedy, which, other than the fact that he was the one who ushered in the first Surgeon General report, should have appeared, at least to some extent. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I'm sure that there are some. But the other part, well, I was just interested. And the other part was the constant hunt for a document called the Gentleman's Agreement. There was something of that sort, and at some point, it may exist out in California somewhere, but I simply don't think that you can rely on that as evidence of something that is truth. And so there was no safer cigarette. I mean, your whole business depended on being basically the same. And if you try to put something out there, and this is a cliche by now, but the reality of it is that if you put something out there that was called safer, you'd certainly be an idiot. And even if you wanted to plead with someone, please make it. That's not a real situation. It's not going to happen. It didn't happen.